What a competition. The Rubik's World Championships 2025, organized by Cubing USA, was, to put it simply, the greatest competition in recent memory. It was a place where dreams were made reality. Timon Kolosinski won with a world record 5x5 average. Sebastian Weyer claimed his rightful place as the king of 4x4. Sujin Feist won 2x2 by 0.02 seconds, and Yiheng Wang got the most deserved world's title in recent memory. But one accomplishment stood above everything else as the most unexpected win in 2025. Each of the 3 clock rounds at Worlds 2023 were glorious, unexpected, and bizarre in their own right. And everything came to a head with one last solve. This is more or less a part 2 of a previous video of mine, but here's a quick recap for you guys. Volodymyr Kupustiansky and Lachlan Gibson were the top 2 seeds, and I predicted they would get gold and silver in some order. I thought Brendan Dunnigan, Eric Kasparek, Carter Thomas, Caleb Wolf-Dunn, Anthony Stoyak, Alessandro Diamampo, Fiona Bao, and Eddie Artsy had a chance at bronze, in that order. Believe me though, this was not as accurate as I hoped. The first round of clock was the second round in the competition, right after 5 blind finals. Early in the morning, nobody was warmed up and the objective was to survive. Get a decent enough average and do not DNF. The first good clock result comes from 6th seed Fiona Bao with a great 2.95 PR2 average despite a DNF in the middle. 4th seed Brendan Dunnigan is competing alongside her and gets a bad 4.0 average despite a brief 2.29 single. In the next heat was the world record holder Lachlan Gibson. His first solve was shaky, but his second solve was the fastest of the round. His third was a DNF, so he safety flipped the last 2 solves just in case. But even with that, his average was a 3.0. Second seed Volodymyr Kupustiansky started off a bit behind Lachlan with a 2.8 and a 2.4, slightly hesitant and shaky. Yet despite a 6-second solve and a counting 3, he got a 2.99 average, beating Lachlan by 0.01 seconds. This was good, but not great. In the background, 5th seed Carter Thomas gets a 2.92 average despite DNFing on his last solve. 3rd seed Eric Kasparek gets a 2.87 average, counting only sub-3s. Both of these performances beat Volodymyr and Lachlan. So already we have 3 solvers that beat the people who are supposed to be the top 2 seeds. Then again, this was only the first round, and the second event in the day at that. It's unlikely that these results would predict the podium, but it is unsettling, and the shadow of this first round will doubtless loom over the rest of the competition. 8th seed Caleb Wolf-Dunn starts the average off with a 4.44 single. That's okay, because the objective in this round is to survive. He starts solving faster than he has ever before, getting 4 2s in a row and breaking his PR by over 0.3. He gets a 2.68 NR average, winning the round, a dominant performance that was sure to send chills down the spine of everyone else. The rest of the seeds make it to the next round with mostly mid-3 averages, although Anthony gets an uncharacteristic 4.10 average. Neither Brendan nor Anthony can afford to repeat this. Later in the day was clock semifinals. The solvers are better warmed up and ready to make fireworks happen. The room for error was smaller, with only the top 20 making it to finals. Considering the talent in the room, the barrier would solidly be sub-4, perhaps requiring a sub-3.5 average for finals. This round ended up being a massacre, where clockers clawed and tore up the rankings just to get that 20th seed. And it didn't end up working so well for some of our protagonists. Carter Thomas was super consistent despite a bad last solve and got another sub-3 average. He was the only one to get back-to-back sub-3 averages. Below him were twin threats, Alessandro Diamampo and Anthony Stoyak, both with 3.0 averages. Alessandro's was marginally more consistent. Eric, Volodymyr, and Brendan were down in the 3.3 range. Good enough to make the next round, but not good for them. But both Brendan and Volodymyr counted 2s, and Volo's last 3 solves were a 193, a 229, and a 285. Once he was in the zone, his times were solid. Jonathan Wang from Canada was able to get a sub-3 NR average with a 286. This won the round, and it really seemed that Lachlan, Volodymyr, and Brendan weren't as dominant as they hoped to be. All-rounder Quinn Maloney got a shocking PR2 3.44 average, clutching the finalist title. Caleb was off the shocking high of getting his first sub-3 average, but he started with a shaky and pausey 412. His third solve was a 391 counting. He was not able to recapture the spirit he had in the morning. He ended up with a 375 average, which would be great in any other situation, but he was 1 spot away from finals. Fiona was extremely consistent, but due to a DNF and a counting 485, she also didn't make finals. She would have to wait until the next Worlds to get her podium. The saddest fate was that of first seed Lachlan Gibson. He started off with an 8, which should be his worst solve. He followed it up with 2 2s. Solid. But then he DNF'd. Now that the 8 was counting, his average was pretty much over, and he ended up getting last place in the round with a DNF average. This was heartbreaking. Maybe Lachlan would have won, maybe Lachlan would have gotten a podium, maybe Lachlan would have failed in the World Finals. But because of this, he didn't even get the chance to fail. At least he's young, and at least he'll be able to redeem himself next Worlds. By the end, 3 out of the top 8 seeds had fallen to the nerves of the moment. The top seeds were struggling to put good results forward and weren't even in the top 8. It should have been clear-cut, but anything was possible. Volodymyr Kapusyanski, Carter Thomas, Brendan Dunnigan, Eric Kasprek. These were the top performers going into this competition. Only Carter had managed to keep his cool in the first 2 rounds, so the best bet was on him. But it did seem like anyone's game. No time to worry about that, as these solvers and more were on the biggest stage in cubing. It was time to figure out who'd soar under pressure and who would wane. Jonathan Wong starts out strong with a 305. Alessandro and Eric are noticeably slower with a 335 and 353 respectively. Volodymyr gets a locky 337, showing his nerves. Carter messes up completely with a 619, which he hopes to not count. Anthony Stoic and Brendan Dunnigan both get sub 3s with a 266 and a 248 respectively. We would later find out that this scramble was a 6 simul, and these solvers took proper advantage of it. But Brendan keeps up this momentum with a second 248 as Anthony gets a bit worse with a 314. He's not doing bad, but Brendan's solving is so much better. Eric gets a 345, which is not bad, but could be better. Carter gets a 372, which is counting for him. If they want a podium, then they definitely have to count a 2 in the next 3 solves. Jonathan Wang gets a 606 the next solve, and Volodymyr gets a 571. Alessandro completely DNFs. Now Carter, Jonathan, Volodymyr, and Alessandro all have bad solves hanging over their heads. Finnish NR holder Arni Salakari and Norwegian NR holder Anders Barhagen are in a similar position, with 1 bad solve and 1 mid to low 3. Brendan Dunnigan is the only one in a really good position at the moment. But in the 3rd solve, Volodymyr locks in and gets a 236, the fastest time of the round so far. It seems that he's ready for these next 2 make or break solves. Anthony Stoic gets a 396, so it looks like his hot streak is over. Arnie gets a 286, and Australian NR holder Kyle Jones gets a 292. It's complete chaos, as podium spots are up for grabs left and right. Anders Barhagen gets a 329, Eric gets a 340, Carter gets a 333, the Discord is insane. Unfortunately, Alessandro counts a 503 and Jonathan DNFs, counting his 6, so they're both out of the running. Brendan continues his amazing pace with a 286, so if any of his next 2 solves are under 364, he will get a sub 3 average, likely securing the win. Brendan's 4th solve, however, is a 390 as he finally succumbs to the pressure. His worst possible average is a 308 now. Anders gets a 309, which takes him out of the running for the win but leaves him room to podium. Same thing happens with Arnie's 330 and Eric's 409. Carter gets a 543 counting, which assassinates his chances, and he's unfortunately out of the running. However, his consistent sub 3 performances in the previous 2 rounds should be admired. Volodymyr gets another great result with a 269, leaving him with a 280 BPA. Kyle Jones gets a 272, which gives him a 307 BPA, barely under Brendan's worst possible average. So Brendan is getting attacked from every angle, and he has to make this last solve count. In the last solve, Kyle Jones gets a DNF, which leaves him with a 345 worst possible average. Volodymyr gets a 303 with a safety flip, as he thought he face jumped, and he ends up with a 303 average. This leaves Brendan with a bit of wiggle room. At this moment, everyone thinks that Volodymyr is the only one in the running to beat Brendan Dunnigan. Even the slightest fumble could spell disaster for him. He needs a 373 to beat Volodymyr.
Isn't it? 323! He's done it! Brendan Dunnigan is the world champion for clock! Electric! It is the same story again. 286 average.
He began celebrating, as he knew that he had become the world champion at that moment, and we, the audience, cheered with him. But what nobody realized was that Anthony Stoic was about to solve. He got a 276 on the 4th scramble, and his BPA was 284. To win, he would need a 269 or better on command. For someone whose PR wasn't even sub 3, this would be an almost insurmountable task. As we realize, the livestream camera operator scrambles to find Anthony in the flurry of finalists. We wait to see if this will really happen.
And in first place, with an average of 2.84 seconds, Anthony Stoic.
How do you feel about everything now that a week has passed?
Well, after a week of being a world champion, it just feels insane that I was able to accomplish that. I did not expect this at all. I was thinking maybe I could get top 10 or something, but becoming a world champion is insane, and I just cannot believe it happened.
What was your practice routine like leading up to Worlds?
Well, around a month before, I basically wasn't doing any clock solves because I was focusing on big cubes as I had 2 comps. After those 2 comps, which was 2 weeks before Worlds, I then started practicing clock, doing probably I don't know, 25 to 50 cells a day, and also doing some comp sims, and I think that would prepare me very well for this competition.
What were your goals right before clock finals?
Well, then when in the second round, I realized I was 4th. My goals kind of shifted from getting top 10 to maybe getting podium, as I saw that it was actually pretty possible. I mean, the 309 averages that I got second round was then PR4, so I didn't think at all that I was going to repeat that in finals, especially with the nerves. So I was expecting to get I don't know, top 10 or something, which I would be really happy with, but I did not expect to win at all. So when I won, I just could not believe it.
What was going through your head solve by solve? I'm especially curious about what you were thinking between the 4th and the 5th solves.
In clock, if you basically make one mistake in memo or execution something, then it's just over. So on the first time I was very nervous, but when I got a good time, it was 2.66, then I kind of chilled out for the second and third solve. Now on the first solve, when I got 3.96, and I got a little bit more nervous as I had one bad time, and if I could get another one, then I would probably be most likely locked out of podium. So in the 4th and 5th solve, I was very nervous. So on the 4th solve, I basically tried to just turn very accurately, and I got 273. And on the last solve, I saw that it was a pretty nice scramble. So I just decided to go all out for the best time, and I got 254, and then I just won.
Has this accomplishment made you change your goals for the future of your cubing career? Do you think you'll win or podium in Sweden?
I think that they have changed because my main goal for my cubing career was to become world champion and get a world record, but now after just 3 years of competing, I already accomplished one of those goals. So I would like to get a WR, but also I want to do one thing that sounds impossible, but I think it is possible, and it is to be national, continental, and world champion all at the same time.
Those are very ambitious goals, but I really hope you accomplish them. One of the most common complaints levied against Clock is that it's not spectator friendly, but that's not true. I watched this thing with my family and they were hooked start to finish. You could make the argument that this was because we weren't watching in person, which I guess is fair, but at the end of the day, most viewers of big competitions are virtual, and virtually, it works great. In almost every event, there are a bunch of pro cubers and 1 to 2 world record holders that take gold every single time. This is a great format, but can get a bit repetitive. But I think Clock hits that balance perfectly, where skill does matter and there's a clear hierarchy, but anyone could win and the event could surprise you. That's why I think that these Clock World Finals were the most exciting of them all. Thanks for watching. Special thanks to Anthony Stoic, as well as Eric Kasperek, Alessandro Di Mampo, Anders Barhagen, Quinn Maloney, Volodymyr Kopustiansky, and Carter Thomas for sending me the footage they had of their clock solves. That was a big help. See you guys in the next one.